Welcome to the Mayo Clinic Human Optimization Project, where we're creating the blueprint to help you become the best human you can be so you can give your gifts back to the world. I'm your guide and fellow optimizer, Christopher Camp. In a world that sometimes bends towards negativity, complimenting and giving praise may seem like a lost art, but this bend towards negativity is exactly why we need to be giving praise now more than ever. The impact that praise has on both the receiver and the giver is massive, so it's something we should all be doing more frequently. Accordingly, the title of our session today is Compliment People, the how and why of giving praise to others. And yes, that is a command in the title. I'm telling you up front that you need to be complimenting more people. To help us understand why, our guest today is Natalie Kane, Chief Administrative Officer of Mayo Clinic in Rochester. In her role, Natalie provides administrative leadership and oversight for Mayo Clinic in Rochester. Ms. Kane is a member of the Mayo Clinic Executive Operations Committee, the Mayo Clinic Board of Governors and Board of Trustees, and the Mayo Clinic Administrative Team. She's the secretary of the Midwest Executive Operations Team at Mayo. She's an assistant professor of healthcare administration and is board certified in healthcare management. She's also a fellow in the American College of Healthcare Executives. Well, Natalie, thank you so much for joining us on the Human Optimization Project. We're very excited to talk about this with you today and thankful that you're here.
Thank you. And I really appreciate the invitation and such a great topic.
Great. So to kind of set the stage and outline things for us, we're going to discuss this in three sections. And I kind of have one big question for each of those. So the first big question is, what is high quality praise and how does it impact others? The second will be, why do so many of us hesitate or misfire when giving praise, and how does that shortfall impact us? And then the last one, what steps can we take to be more effective of praising others in our lives? Does that sound fair?
That sounds great.
All right, let's dive into it. So for our first section, we're going to talk a little bit about what praise is and how it impacts others. So my first question for you is just, what exactly is praise and how do we distinguish it from generic positive feedback?
Well, I think if you think about generic positive feedback, you might think about somebody saying thank you or good job. And then if you think about high quality praise, it's, I think, something that really resonates with the person you're trying to connect with. So thinking about how do you value somebody's effort in really a meaningful way that shows it's specific to them and really the effort that they've put into making sure that something goes well.
So I like that you're defining it as being more specific and personalized to that individual, which I think is one of the reasons it can be much more powerful than generic feedback. So can we get into that power of praise or some of the potential benefits of giving good praise?
Yeah, and I think you might just, personally reflect on when somebody's really given you praise or some recognition for the work that you've done. So I think, first of all, you generally have probably a positive association with that, as well as probably the effort that you put into the particular project or whatever it was that you were working on. I think it also gives you encouragement to reinforce that work that you're doing. For example, if we're working on something, I think that's a great way to continue to build our relationship and trust. And I think especially today, people are really looking for opportunities to build kind of community, sense of trust. And so using praise specifically to help thank the colleagues that you're working with, whether that's, at work or some community things that you're working on, or even at home, I think that goes a long way.
It's interesting what you said about connecting with others too, because I think we are all wired to want to connect. And obviously our world has changed now with social media and things that we do electronically, and a lot of our connections are gone there. And a lot of those systems are designed to give us these small little hits of praise, the likes and the mentions and the pokes and all of this that we can do. And so our brains have become wired for these positive social signals. But I think in a lot of sense, those can often be artificial, and like giving real genuine praise that you're talking about is sort of the real deal. That is the real genuine social signal that so many of us are wired for and crave. Is that true?
I think from my perspective, it definitely is. And I think the more specific you can be when you are giving somebody the praise, the more genuine it becomes, right? And so rather than just hearing awesome job, which is kind of a brief endorphin, I think if you hear like, I really appreciate the time and the attention that you put into this, and it really made a big impact in the following way, I think people carry that with them a little bit longer. And I think it further builds out that sense of connection that we have.
Great. So can we talk a little bit about praise for the praise giver? So I think it always feels good to receive praise. Everybody recognizes that. They know that there are benefits. And there's actually benefits that go beyond some of what we're discussing too. There's improved joy and productivity and happiness and decreased burnout and all those things, which are great. And that's for the receiver of the praise. What about the person giving the praise?
I personally am probably more wired that I like to give praise as opposed to receive it, probably in my humble Midwest way. But I do think there's a lot of joy that you can have also in giving praise. And so one of the ways, for example, I like to do that is also write thank you cards to teams that have either gone above and beyond or someone that's been willing to step up and give a presentation. Someone recently took on a role where they have to support our staff through a variety of change. And so like to just drop a note on their desk, probably when they're not there, so that they can read that in their own moment and process that. And then I think that means a lot to them that you took some time out of your day to really recognize them in a variety of ways. And for me, it's great to pause and reflect as I'm writing that note around really the impact that that individual's made. And I think about not only kind of that moment, but generally working with those individuals for a few years, kind of all the times that they've stepped up and just kind of acknowledging that as well.
We have another session coming up on the project about gratitude and the value and importance of gratitude. And what you're talking about reminds me of that. And I think oftentimes being the one who gives the praise, it forces you to pause and think about what you're grateful for. And you think about the impact that individual has had on you or the people around you. And so it's almost a way of sort of forcing gratitude, which I think can be helpful. Oftentimes, as you're sitting here, you're mentioning that, talking about thank you cards, and I'm going, oh yeah, I actually have some that I need to be sending right now, but I don't have the time, so I'm going through all this in my head. It can be a challenge, and it is a lot of energy. It is a lot of effort, but in reality, we don't typically we neglect the fact that actually benefits us as well. Like if we can pause and we can take that time, it then allows us to realize like, oh yeah, I can be grateful for this person that I'm writing this thing. I'm doing this for a reason, not just to make them feel good, but also because they did something that impacted me. And I think that gratitude can have immense benefits for us in both ways.
I also think it could be a quick text or an email as well, right? And so just connecting with them, I think, in a variety of ways is really meaningful. And I think it also empowers the team to think about that positive feedback wants me to continue to lean into that and continue to support our teams in a variety of ways. I think healthcare in general is very people-oriented. A lot of people want to go into healthcare to help other people. And so I think especially that building of connection, leaning into a common purpose, supporting our colleagues, helping our patients in a variety of ways, I think really brings back kind of that meaning and purpose in the work they're doing.
So in order for praise to be really effective, in your mind, what are sort of the key elements or components that it needs to contain?
I think it needs to be specific, really hopefully timely, also relatable to the individual. I think drive, really something beyond kind of great job, which people like to hear, but really it brings the more genuine aspects of that. And then I think further reinforces the great work that your teams or colleagues are doing.
Mm-hmm. I think the specificity is a great point. As you mentioned earlier, that is sort of what distinguishes it from the generic positive feedback. And I do think the specificity shows the receiver that this is above and beyond, that I'm actually thinking about you and actually care about you, and I'm making this unique to you, which I think is really helpful. You also mentioned timely as well. Why is the timing important?
Well, for me, let's say I just thought about when last week I gave a big presentation. Probably immediately after the presentation's over, you're wondering, wonder how that went, And so the more, quick you can receive that feedback, I think the better it reinforces how things are going. Certainly, it's great to always get feedback, even if it comes in a week or two later. But I think most people are wanting to know about the feedback. Was it great? What should I have done differently? So how can I learn from that? And so I think the more timely we can give that feedback to them, it really reinforces the impact that people have made.
That's great. And I also think too that the feedback, it's also meant to shape our behavior and
Yes.
sort of change our behavior. It's probably going to be more effective in doing that if it's delivered closely to when the behavior was enacted as well. We all tend to forget, and with time, our information and knowledge decays. So if we don't do it quickly, I do think it loses effect. So I think that's that great point that it does need to be timely and relatable. And I think another element too that you suggested that is sincerity. I think that it's pretty easy for any of us to sort of sniff out praise that's not heartfelt or genuine. So I think that it needs to be really truthful and meaningful as well. Would you agree?
Yes, I think absolutely. And I think the more specific you can be around that and relate to people around what they're looking for, I think the bigger impact that can ultimately be.
Okay. So that's a great list of the key elements of praise. Now I'm wondering a little bit about what things or behaviors should we be praising? Because I think sometimes that can be a hang up for people and they think, oh, is it okay for me to comment on this? Is it appropriate for me to say this? Is that going to be awkward? Is that going to be weird? So what types of things should we be praising in others? Do they need to be big, heroic acts of service, or can they be small? Should it be a mix?
I personally think it's great to have a mix of praise. So certainly you want to praise people for taking on big tasks, making kind of really monumental change. But I think also if you could stop to praise people, for example, here at Mayo Clinic, there are a lot of patients walking through the subway. A lot of our staff stop and help them with directions or ask them how their day is going. And those things also can go unnoticed, but they make a big impact in terms of our patient's experience. And so occasionally, hopping in the elevator with somebody that's just helped a patient and say, that was really kind of you to help them out with X, Y, Z, I think can also make a big difference, in addition to really giving praise and feedback to somebody that's really taken on a big project to move that forward. So I think it's great to have variety in terms of how you're connecting and praising with people. One of my colleagues carries around some chocolates with them. And when they run into people and see them doing good things, they'll say, hey, I really appreciate you doing that. And I think you can just see the smile on that individual's face when it's coming. So I think finding big and small ways to praise and thank the teams for what they're doing, I think goes a long way in terms of like you being the recipient of that.
That's really meaningful. I think oftentimes for these like big, huge, heroic efforts, those are easier for us to praise. And we often think, oh, I've got to do something. They did something big for me. I did something big for them. And we all kind of work through that. But we often neglect these little, small opportunities to do it. And that might be the area where we can improve the most because it's so quick, it's so easy, it's such a small, it requires almost zero effort, to give some small specific praise for those small things. And I think doing that regularly could potentially have a huge impact on people. So that might be, as you're sitting there describing that, I'm wondering that might be the area that most of us need to work on the most is consistently giving small amounts of praise as opposed to the big ones.
I think the other thing I would just add to that briefly is one of the favorite ways I like to praise people is when it's unexpected, right? And so I think, we're all hoping for big feedback on big projects and big tasks that we've done. People are less expecting feedback on what they feel would be something they do every day or positively reinforcing that. And I think sometimes it's best from the giver standpoint to give praise in those areas where it's least expected, but people are doing really great things.
Great. So then my last question in this section is about quantity. So we've talked about how to give good praise or the key elements of praise. We've talked about what to praise. Now I want to ask, how often are we supposed to be praising? Is this a simple thing where more is better, or is there an upper limit where you can do it too much?
I think it's important to always be genuine about it, right? And so that being said, I think there are probably a variety of things where you could do to incorporate praise into your everyday, right? Even if you think about throughout the course of your day, morning, afternoon, evening. There are probably three things most every day that you could find to praise people. They may not always be big, but I think, trying to set a little bit for what feels genuine to you, an opportunity, at least daily, to find an opportunity to praise either a colleague, a family member, a friend for the great work that they're doing or how they're making an impact in a positive way for others.
And I know John Gottman has done some work in marriages that's shown that in order to erase one negative comment, you need to make 5 or more positive comments, which is pretty mind blowing. But in couples that do that, have a 5-to-1 positive to negative ratio, they have a much higher rate of marriage satisfaction than others. And so I know that's within the confines of marriage, but I would imagine that probably plays out in most of our relationships, that we need more positive interactions because unfortunately that negative criticism tends to, we weigh it a lot heavier in our minds. So let's transition into our second section here where we're going to talk about why so many of us kind of hesitate or misfire when doing this. And I think it is a challenge. It seems like it should be easy, but it is a challenge. And so my first question is, despite clear and obvious benefits of genuinely praising others, why do we struggle with this?
I think that's a good question because I think people are well intended around it. I think a few obvious things that come to mind is, life just can get very busy for people. And, especially when there's an expectation to be present where you are, but you also have things that are, coming at you, whether it's text messages or Teams or emails, et cetera. There's just kind of a lot. And so I think that busyness sometimes, if it's not intentional, you can kind of miss opportunities there. I think the other thing is, you might worried about how you would give the praise, so I might be a little bit worried about, I hope this will be well received. Or especially living in Minnesota, I think there's a little bit of the Minnesota nice. And so you're also a little bit worried at times to say, I hope this doesn't make somebody uncomfortable if I call them out in a positive way to say, that was really amazing work. Thank you so much for doing that. Because people are quick to deflect at times to say, oh, it was really the team, or, it was really nothing. And so I think kind of those things sometimes, in my opinion, might be the biggest kind of derailers from giving that feedback in a positive way and really praising our colleagues and our teammates. But I think just taking time to be intentional around that can really help go in a variety of ways. And remember, praise doesn't always have to be verbal. So you could, if you're worried you might embarrass somebody because they're a very humble person, you could send that praise to them quietly in a text or an email or a note, or just make sure that that you've had the opportunity to really thank them and praise them from the great work that they've been doing and what an impact that's had on others. Because I think especially for people that are humble, that goes a long way to know that you have noticed that they have been able to make such a positive impact.
That really gets back to your point about specificity earlier. You really kind of need to, ideally, you'd like to know that person to know, is this a person who likes the attention and the limelight and wants to be praised in front of their coworkers and peers at the meeting? Or is this somebody who might be humiliated by that and would rather have a quiet message or note slipped to them as well? So I think that really highlights the specificity that you made. And one of the things I wonder too is, we talked earlier about the negativity bias, how we tend to weigh negative comments more than positive comments, unfortunately. But I also think that the same can be said for us when we're observing other people's behavior, and that somebody might do 3 or 4 things that are great, but they do one thing that's bad. And we completely write them off as being bad because we let that negative thing. So I wonder if one of the reasons that we don't do it enough is because we overweight the negative things, the mistakes people make, and we underweight the positive things that they do as well. So I think that's something that we all have to kind of work through. So what are some of the most common mistakes or pitfalls that you see in others when they try to deliver praise?
I think probably one of the most common might be not being specific enough around what somebody was doing. So if you say, great job, after somebody's worked on a project for a month, it might be hard to know, well, what part of kind of this project did you really like, and where did I hit the mark, and maybe where was that not so great? And so I think the more we can be specific around that, I think that would be great. I think also if that would be your standard response every time someone presents or turns in a project, then it's hard to know kind of where you're calibrating on that scale of, is it always great? Could it be exceptional? Where am I landing on that? And then I think the other one might just be if the praise comes like 3 or 4 weeks after you've done something, then, people can start to wonder, maybe they didn't like that. Maybe, I hit the mark on this, but I missed the mark on that. And so those things probably in my mind would be where the biggest pitfalls have come.
Actually, I have a personal story that I just thought about as you were mentioning that. If it's sort of your standard praise that you give all the time, I remember in medical school, we were at a party with all our classmates, and somebody came up to me and said something to me, really complimented me on what I was wearing, which is not very common for me. So I remembered that. I was like, oh, wow, that's interesting. And said I looked really nice. And then I noticed about 2 minutes later, one of our other classmates came in who I remembered at the time actually had the flu and was still in his pajamas. And this person said the exact same thing to that individual. And I thought, oh, wow. Like on one hand, I was like, okay, she's incredibly nice to compliment us. But then I also thought, wait a minute. I know that this guy's currently at his worst and I'm at my best. And she's, calling those two things equivalent basically in her mind. So it sort of, it sort of shocked me because I think, wasn't as specific. Now that's a silly example, but I think that sort of rings true. If you have the one pat answer, the pat phrase that you give to everybody, it certainly has less meaning, I think, and people know that as well. Okay. Now, this is a question I think a lot of people struggle with. What is the best way to receive praise? I've seen people do it well, and I've seen people do it poorly in multiple different ways. So any advice for our audience? Hopefully they're out there getting some compliments and getting some praise. How should they receive that? What's the healthiest way to do that?
That's a good question. I think something that I've had to work on over time. I would say that has not come very naturally to me. I would say a few years ago when people would give me positive feedback or praise around something, my initial reaction would be to be kind of uncomfortable around that, even though it was very well intended to just say, oh, it was the team, or oh, that's too kind, or just kind of deflect that. And I've learned over time that, people are really sincere when they make the effort to give you praise and be willing to accept that. And if I'm less comfortable accepting it for myself, accepting on behalf of the team, right? To say, thank you so much. Our team has worked really hard on that, and we are excited about the impact we're making. Rather than just say, oh, which I think historically has been kind of my reaction to that. And so I do think it's something to kind of learn and grow. But I also think, also receiving cards from people around kind of the impact that you've made, or to hear that feedback around the project has really made a difference, I think has really been meaningful for me, right, in my career. And I think energizes and charges me up for the next thing I'm working on and how can we make a positive difference. And so I think just being willing to move a little bit from deflecting that in a humble way to being willing to encourage people to accept that. And I think if, I'm more willing to do that, probably others are as well. And so I think it has sometimes a positive chain reaction when we think about that.
That's great. So you're saying you don't deflect the praise, and you worded that very well, that you can accept the praise and still acknowledge the contributions of your team. So you can accept that praise on behalf of your entire team if it was a team effort, which I think is great. One of the things that I used to struggle with is if people would give me praise, I would often tend towards self-deprecation during that. And then I realized that that's almost insulting, can be insulting to the praise giver.
Absolutely.
So if somebody says, I'm thinking of a random example, oh, I really like your car. And you say, oh, this old beater, this old piece of junk. It's like, wait a minute, I just said it was nice. And now you're saying it's a piece of junk. Like you're insulting my compliment here. And so I think you have to be careful. Self-deflection or self-deprecation can be a little bit insulting to the person giving praise. So I think you got to be careful there. What about have you seen, I certainly have, examples where people can sometimes be too aggressive about accepting praise. And maybe that's not the right way to word it, but an example would be if I say, oh, I think you really did a great job in this, offer praise and make it specific. And they say, oh, really? Great. Tell me more. tell me more, and I have seen that where people, for whatever reason, are asking for more, like the praise you gave wasn't enough. They need more. I think in those situations, something else might be going on there. Have you been in that situation? And what do you think about that?
I would say probably not too often in that situation, but what I've almost always encountered is people are really hungry for feedback. And so telling them a little bit more about specifically what you liked around the project or whatever it was that you were working on where you were giving them praise. And then a follow-up question might come also back to you. So just being prepared to say, well, what could I have done better? Right. And so if someone is really hungry for feedback, they might be asking kind of those additional questions. But that's a great area for you to lean into and just say, um, here is specifically why I thought the project was great because your delivery was good. But I think it's great that people are hungry for feedback when they go down that line of questioning. And so that's an easy one to just pivot to help them because they probably value your feedback and insights and want to continue to do better. And so how do you feed that?
That's great. So I hadn't thought about that, but I think if you do hear that, that's probably somebody reaching out saying, I need to know more about how I'm doing. Either give that feedback to them then, or if you're not prepared to, maybe say, great question. Let's set up a time to talk about that again.
That would be another great idea.
Yeah. So now let's transition into our third section. And I want to use this to try to give the audience some actual practical steps and strategies that they can use to get better at this. So our third big question was, what steps can we take to be more effective of praising others in our lives? And within that, my first question I have for you is, can you give me an example of a praise that's been well done in your mind? It can be a real example or a made up example, but I want people to kind of see an example of what good praise looks like.
So I think good praise is generally very timely, very specific, and ideally meaningful to the individual that you're giving it to. And when that's best done, I think you really understand that individual, what they value, what they're looking for, what their goals are. And so the feedback that you're providing and the praise that you're giving to them really aligns around kind of what you understand about them as an individual.
So I'm thinking if I need to be giving praise that is both timely and specific, it might help me to plan ahead a little bit in doing this. And so do you ever find yourself saying, okay, if this individual does X, if they accomplish this, if they do this, or this is how I'm going to respond. Is that a helpful strategy for you?
I think, yes, kind of planning ahead, but also just having a mindset of intentional praise as part of kind of your daily work, I think can help with that because then you have those mental clues to say, wow, Steve has really picked up this big project. I know he took that on top of the other responsibilities that he's juggling, but he really feels passionately about making a difference in this space. And then you can kind of weave that in, that background, kind of that knowledge into the praise that you're delivering. So, Steve, that was really awesome that you were willing to take this project on above and beyond kind of the rest of the work that you're carrying. And so that could be something that you would bring with you over the course of, for example, 2 weeks while they're working on this project. And so at the end, you can say, that's really amazing that you were able to accomplish that over the 2 weeks. I saw how you were able to juggle to keep everything moving, and you made such a positive impact in terms of how you were able to improve our processes to support our patients, right? And so I think building a little bit of an intentional mindset on a daily basis around bringing praise can help us kind of pre-plan to make sure that the praise we are giving is really specific, timely, and meaningful for the people where we're delivering that to.
And what you're talking about is almost just developing a habit of praise. You just make it a part of your system. It's a part of your routine. It's kind of who you are. You just do it automatically. Still keeping it genuine, but you just make it a part of your default. Which I think is excellent. That's really consistent with kind of everything we talk about as a part of this program. So, we talked about how praise can come in all sorts of different forms, and that you can have, small little praise, this huge, massive praise. I kind of would love to get some examples from you on what that could look like. And you gave us a few earlier. You talked about just saying, great job on the elevator, or your friend that passes out the chocolates, which I think is wonderful. Can you give us some other examples, whether it's some of the small praise, the medium, or big, some other ways that you've seen it done effectively, different techniques and things?
I think when someone's chairing a meeting, to really be intentional around calling out the effort of the team and how they're coming together around a specific goal and what that goal actually means in terms of if that's things that are able to then support our staff in a different way, if that's making a positive impact for our patients, if that's bringing in additional dollars to help us support our patients in a variety of different ways. And so really being specific around what the team was able to accomplish. I've also seen probably many organizations through their HR departments or others have recognition and rewards and awards that you can give to people. So I think, for example, at Mayo Clinic, one of the most meaningful ways we can acknowledge our consultants or our allied health staff is to acknowledge them in big awards that we have on an annual basis. And a lot of people that are doing amazing work never think about receiving those awards. But in my leadership role, I had the opportunity to present several of those awards to people. And so to see someone, receive the Distinguished Administrator Award on the Allied Health Staff side, or to see someone receive our CARES Award because they've been demonstrating our values and actions, can be one of the most rewarding days of work they've had at Mayo Clinic throughout their entire career. And so I think never underestimating the impact of that praise and recognition and how meaningful and like how purpose driven that can be for our colleagues. I think we should never underestimate that.
And I think we've actually seen there's studies out there that have shown that awards system or rewards systems within companies actually improve employee morale, well-being, joy, and a lot of other factors, which I think is impactful. One of the things that I've noticed about a lot of the awards at Mayo is that oftentimes the person is given the award and it is passed on to, or it is given to them directly by somebody who has been a beneficiary of their great effort. So for instance, I know like with our Distinguished Educator Awards, those are selected by learners, and then there's a big program. But one of the things I think that is most special about that is that when that award is given to the educator, it's one of their students that actually gives them the award and usually says some words about them. And I think that's such a cool way of recognizing what they do and praising them and doing it publicly, but also being able to make it specific and give kind of real world examples of what they're doing. So I think a lot of times for large groups or organizations, it can be challenging to be super specific for individuals when you have so many individuals. But I think Mayo's done a great job of being creative and finding ways of doing that. What are some strategies that you can think of for people to be timely? So you mentioned, being specific is a key element, which we've talked about. What are some key strategies for being timely with the praise? Because I think that can be challenging for us as well.
Well, I think, personally for me, challenging myself to make sure that I am giving praise every day, right? And so if it gets to be the afternoon and I have not done that yet, it's a conscious reminder to myself that a lot of amazing things are happening. Really talented people are working in a variety of ways to make a positive impact. And so it's a good trigger for me to say, I need to get on the ball in a purposeful way to really call out the amazing things that are happening here. I also think because some days can get busy too, Saturday mornings are a little bit generally a calmer time in the week for me. And so being really intentional then around having some set times as well to think about giving out praise, whether that's to my family, friends, or, coworkers. I think just being intentional around those opportunities, I think is great. And then also within the moments or within the meetings or team connections that we have, how do we think about really giving praise? I know some of my colleagues set aside dedicated time in the meetings to really just have an opportunity for recognition or praise, and that's a great way to have a positive start on the meeting as well. So knowing that those are really sincere moments that are happening, I think there are a variety of ways that you can tackle that, whether it's really structured or less structured, but just making sure that it is a priority to praise all the great work that, your colleagues, your family, your friends are doing on a regular basis.
So you mentioned friends and family there. I think really everything that we've talked about so far is applicable in the boardroom, on the ground floor and in the home. Would you agree? These are universal
Yes,
concepts. These are not just executive leadership concepts. This is for everybody in all walks of life.
absolutely.
Yeah. And in fact, probably even most important in the home and with the friends and family as well. Great. So let's talk a little bit about how we do it. I kind of want a step-by-step plan. So I know that there isn't such a thing, but if I were to ask you to give me a step-by-step plan for improving my ability to praise others, what would you tell me to do?
I think first thing would be to just think about making it a part of your daily routine, right? Um, and to do that, then you really have to have a ear and mind open to the great things that are happening around you. And then try to make sure that you're incorporating a part of your regular routine. Because there's a lot of great things that are happening. And, you talked a little bit earlier about how people can kind of focus on the negative things or also think about, how you can also really celebrate the good things that are happening and the great people that we have the opportunity to interact with on a daily basis.
Great. So I like that. So make it a part of your normal routine. And I think sometimes you have to be intentional about it, and it might not be natural to you to go look for the positive things. Unfortunately, we all tend to look for the negative things. So intentionally look for and celebrate the positives, which I think is really helpful as well. And I would tack on there too, what you told us early about make sure that you keep it timely and specific as well. Okay.
I
Excellent.
think it also is a good exercise to get you less kind of internally focused around, where I could improve and what I could do better, which is certainly an important part of kind of your overall construct, but also really having appreciation for the colleagues that you had the opportunity to work with on a regular basis.
Great. And if I were to get better, if I were commit to doing this, so I say I'm going to make it a part of my routine. I'm going to look for and celebrate the positive. I'm going to be timely. I'm going to be specific. What benefits can I expect in my life if I were to commit to that?
Well, I think there are probably many, right? One, I think, the overall culture of the teams that you're working with is probably going to improve because people feel that you're committed to the team and also committed to them. And you're driving a better sense of community across your teams. And I think right now everyone is looking for community and an opportunity to have that connectiveness, which I think can really improve everyone's morale. And it helps people find more meaning and purpose in their work. So, to spend a lot of time on a project and then not hear about how it's going doesn't give you a lot of positive reinforcement or, raise your hand to take on the next one. But if people feel that you're really genuinely taking an interest in them and you're making a positive difference with the work that you're doing, that's somewhere where you want to be, right? And I think it also drives more meaning and purpose in the work that's happening.
And I think that's somewhere where both the person receiving the praise, they're going to want to be in that environment much more, and the person giving the praise is going to want to be in that environment. So I think that is absolutely a two-way street. So as I start down this process and I try to improve and become better at giving praise, what are some common mistakes you've seen people make, or what setbacks can I anticipate along the road?
I think some people might not be ready or surprised to hear that positive feedback, and then they might want to deflect that, right? Or, you also talked about kind of dismissing that in a variety of ways. And so just be ready to roll with that. I think people will get more comfortable with it. Also, I think if as you get to know the individuals, you'll know what kind of praise resonates well with them. They might not be somebody that wants to be, positively called out with praise in a meeting, but they may respond really well or find a lot of meaning and purpose in a quick email or a quick text or a quick note around what a positive impact that has made. And so I think the more you get to know your team, the more you can customize that feedback based on what people will respond well to.
And I would imagine if you're all of a sudden giving a lot of praise and you're getting a lot of deflection from people, or if they're self-deprecating or they're not receiving it well, it might be that these individuals are very much caught off guard by the fact that you're giving praise. So it might be a reflection of the fact that you were really bad at this to begin with, and they're thinking, "Who is this person now? All of a sudden, like being kind." And so I think that if you see that, if you're worried, like how do I go from never doing this to doing it a lot, you might see a few more bumps along the way. But I would encourage that person to keep going, because that'll quickly change. I think people would much rather have that version of you than the previous version that never gave any praise as well. So I think depending on where you're starting, you might get a little bit more of that from people compared to others.
And I think people will know when it's genuine and sincere. And so I think as long as it's coming from that place, I think people will be open to receiving it.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, any last tips, sort of as we wrap up here, any final tips for people that are on their journey to improve at giving others praise?
I would just say I think it's a journey. So there will be ups and downs with that, just like everything. But I think the important part is to be open and mindful to the opportunities to give praise.
Very well said. All right. So we'll kind of summarize things here. I've been taking notes as we've been talking, Natalie. So I kind of like a chance just to kind of run back through my notes and tell you the things that stuck out to me and what I learned. So you talked about the key elements of praise being that it should be personalized to the individual. It should be specific to them. It needs to be very timely, needs to be relatable, needs to be genuine. You also mentioned that sometimes it's great when it's unexpected as well. Some of the benefits of giving praise: increased joy, decreased burnout, improved true, genuine social connections that we're all needing. And by the way, all of those things improve our health in every metric and increase our lifespan and just have an infinite number of positive benefits for us. And the interesting thing is that those benefits go to the receiver of the praise, but also the person giving the praise has the same benefits, and is a good chance for the praise giver to experience a little bit of gratitude, which also has the same benefits. We also talked about how the praise can be small or it can be huge, and there's times and indications for all of it, and we probably should spend more time giving the small praise. The big things, it's a little easier for us to be thankful and grateful for, but sometimes those small things are probably the opportunities that we miss out on. And we talked about reasons why we struggle. We're too busy. We don't know how to do it. We have a bias towards negativity, or we're afraid we're going to embarrass people. But I think all of those things will get better if we're intentional about it. And then when you gave sort of your final tips and steps, make praise a part of your normal routine. I loved how you talked about, that it's been into the afternoon, you haven't praised anybody yet, that you're behind. And so you just make it a normal, habitual part of your systems, and you try to intentionally celebrate the positives in others, keep it timely, keep it specific. So that's sort of my summary of our discussion today. And you've answered our three big questions masterfully over the last 40 minutes here, but I want to give you a chance to answer them specifically here. So we'll get kind of the quick answers to these three questions again. So number one, what is high quality praise and how does it impact others?
I think high quality praise is specific, timely, and really meaningful to the person that you're delivering it to.
And our second one, why do so many of us hesitate or misfire when giving praise, and how does that shortfall impact us?
I think we either hesitate or misfire because we're afraid maybe we don't want to say the wrong thing, or we're not sure how it'll be received. But I think that's where something you can start small and genuine, and also look for the opportunity to share praise when it's least expected, I think is a good way to get started on that and kind of overcome that fear that you might have around getting started.
Great. And then our last question, what steps can we take to be more effective at praising others in our lives?
Getting to better know the individuals that you're working with to make sure you understand like what's most meaningful to them, because that really can help you decide how to best deliver that praise that you're giving to them, whether they would prefer to have something written or, they really like to have the praise in front of their colleagues. Or if you really think through, what is most meaningful to them and what is the why behind the work that they're doing, and you can incorporate that into the positive praise and feedback that you're giving. That gives the most meaningful, I think, response to the people that are receiving the praise.
Excellent. So we always like to end with a challenge or a call to action. So we try to give folks a suggestion on where they can start to get the first win in this process of praising people more effectively. So after talking with you, I think the challenge would be best suited to target some of those small areas, those small little things that we see in just the short little quick burst of praise. So the challenge is going to be for our audience is within the course of one day, a 24-hour period, to praise 3 different people for 3 different things. And it can be the smallest, tiniest thing, I like your shirt, or that was kind of you. Thank you for doing that. And it can be a stranger or it can be somebody you know, but you got to do at least 3 of them in a 24-hour period. And I want you to think a little bit about how that makes you feel and how that impacts you. It's obviously going to have a positive impact on the person you give it to, but reflect a little bit on how it impacts you and then scale it up from there. And bonus points if you keep chocolates in your pocket and you pass those out like your colleague. I like that. I like that. Well, Natalie, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a great session. I've learned a ton. I think it's been immensely helpful. So the title of our session today was Compliment People, the how and why of giving praise to others. And the beginning of that title, Compliment People, it is a command. I'm telling you to do it. Normally, I'm not as aggressive with the titles on these as I am with this one, but this one is a command to go out there and do it. Natalie, thank you so much for joining and sharing your wisdom with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. And to our audience, be sure to live intentionally, consistently better. Keep striving to be the best human you can be and never stop optimizing. Thanks for listening to the Mayo Clinic Human Optimization Project. If you like this episode, hit subscribe and leave a review. It helps others find us. Know someone who might benefit? Share the episode with them to join us in our mission to help as many people as possible become the best humans they can be. Have feedback or a topic idea? Email us at optimize@mayo.edu. And be sure to look for us on Instagram, X, and YouTube.
This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be relied upon for medical, professional, or legal advice. Always consult with a qualified professional for any questions. The appearance of any guest does not imply an endorsement of them, their employer, or any entity they represent. The views and opinions expressed by the guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Mayo Clinic. Reference to any product, service, or entity is for informational purposes only and does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by Mayo Clinic.